Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and this is my top 10 games of 2021. Now, 2021, I gotta admit, when we got to like October, November, somewhere in there, I was starting to think, when am I even gonna put this video together? One, it seems like I haven't played enough games in 2021 yet. They released in 2021. And two, at the time, I was like, I don't know if this is gonna be, that good of a year. Like, how am I even gonna come up with 10 games? Some of the games, are they even gonna earn this spot? And here we sit, and I have been agonizing over this list. I ended up playing so many games in 2021 in the back half of the year, over the holidays, even the start of this year. And there's just so much stiff competition between them. I have to preface this list by saying that, honestly, the margin of difference between spot number 1 and spot number 6 even, all those games are so close for me that this is where I rank them now. Honestly, in 6 months, the order might change, but what will not change is how much I love these games. So, I guess unless I play one 12 times and I realize I've seen everything, at that point it'll slowly dissipate down the list. But either way, these are some really quality games. 2021 turned out to be an amazing year. Not much more to say. The only thing I'll mention is obviously Carlo's not here with me today. Carlo's going to be doing his list separately. He has games he still wants to play before he can even do his list, so you will see his list in the near future. But for now, you'll get mine, and we're going to jump right in with game number 10, which is Oath. So Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile is a massive game. This is a huge game from Leader Games, the designers of Root. And this is I almost said campaign game, and it is not a campaign game. It has campaign feel to it in the sense that if you keep coming back to play with the same group over and over again, you're going to be rewarded by the fact that you're seemingly crafting a story over several plays of Oath. So things that happen in game 1, game 2, game 3, you're going to remember. You're going to write it in this journal that comes with the game. You're going to remember how this person became the chancellor and who they had to backstab to be able to do that, or the path they took, and those kind of consequences are going to carry over into the next game that you play, and cards you brought in and saw leave the game are going to stay removed from the game or stay added to the game. Things that you placed onto different areas in general that are in the game are going to change from session to session and be decided by the way one session ends. So there are campaign and legacy style things going on in Oath, but it very much is a game that you can have people drop in, drop out, and there's not this overarching campaign thing that's going on. It's just you're rewarded a little bit extra by continuing to play with the same group, and I think that's the best way to experience Oath. And honestly, the reason it's on this list, even though the gameplay I found to be super fun, and I love all the different ways you can achieve victory. There's tons of different paths to victory, and you have to be really, really sly and clever in how you're going to find a way to win. And we have tons of great memories from seeing people do that around the table. The thing that keeps me wanting to come back to Oath, and honestly earns it this 10th spot on the list, is the fact that that narrative that you build is just so amazing with the right group of people. If you get a group of friends together and you're playing Oath once a month, the stories you're going to craft together, the things you're going to record in the journal, giving the right to be able to write in the journal, two different people, whoever won the session, whoever became the chancellor, allowing them to write in the journal and craft their story in this sort of history book that you're making. There's so much cool stuff going on in Oath. It is definitely a game that I think over time is going to drop down lists for me, only because I'm going to struggle to play it, I think, over time. That's probably one of the toughest things about Oath, is that for as great of a game as it is, if you are not scheduling, sessions every so often, or deciding I'm going to play this game with this group this many times a year or this often, I could see it being one that, because of the complicated rules overhead, and especially if you're bringing new people into it and they have to learn the game and compete with these people that have played for many sessions, I could see it being one that's just harder to get to the table. A lot of those kind of criticisms are levied against Root as well. So I don't think that stops it from being a great game or detracts from that experience. But I just think that this is probably as high as you're going to see Oath make it on a list like this for me, or where it landed on my top 50 of all time, things like that. So either way, it deserves a spot on this list. I had such a great time with Oath this year, such a memorable experience, and I'm so glad I got to experience it. That is Oath, my number 10. Okay, number 9 on the list. This is a game, probably one of the most recent ones I played on this list, and I played a couple times now, and that is Furnace. Furnace is a game that, I will be completely honest with you, I went right over my head. I knew about it, I heard about it, but I just never looked into it because something to do with the cover and the title. I just didn't think this game was going to speak to me. Not every game lands with everyone, even ones that sometimes end up on the top lists of other content creators in the community. I will just know from looking at them, hey, this just isn't a game for me. I think I unfairly said that about Furnace without even really looking into it. It wasn't until Carlo actually brought it up to me and said, sometimes we split games for all you can board. We'll each pay half the cost, and we'll say, hey, what games do we want to buy? We might want to do some videos on them. We can share them at each of our houses. Furnace was one of the ones he asked me about, and I thought, yeah, you know what, like, why not? I hear people talking about it, I'll give it a shot. I adore Furnace now. I think that the best thing about it is that it plays super quick, but it has such an addicting gameplay mechanic and flow going on with the auction system. So this game can be played at 2. It's better with more people only because then you have a more interesting auction thing going on. But the fact that you're having, the way the auction system works is just super streamlined, super simple, but having to do that to claim these different, essentially like engine builder type cars that you're bringing into your personal supply is just the most interesting thing about it. And like I said many, many times in other videos, I've realized over the course of this last year how much I enjoy the auction mechanic. It ends up bringing tons of laughs around the table. Playing games like Modern Art, Biblios, different things like that have just been some of the highlights of my last couple of years playing games. Furnace is now another one that does those things that I'm just super pumped that I've now played, because I'm going to be asking to play this a lot. It plays like in a 2-player game. You can probably play this game once you know the rules and everything, likely in half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. I would say that even when you're playing with 3 or 4, I'd be surprised once everyone knows the rules and has maybe played a session or 2 if you're going to see games getting anywhere near to the 2-hour mark. I don't even think that would be close. It's just a very quick playing game that has this really interesting I don't want to say gameplay mechanic, because I've seen engine building and auctioning in other games, but tying them together in this really simplistic way somehow just works for Furnace. And the fact that sometimes you don't even want to win the cards that you're bidding on. Sometimes you just want someone else to bid higher than you, because the way that Furnace's auction system works is if you're outbidding a card, you get sort of this consolation selection of resources, and the amount you get is dependent on which token you bid with. So if you bid with a 2, you're going to get 2 times the amount of icons that are listed on the top of the card. If you bid with 1, you just get 1 of those. So sometimes you want to lose bids just to get more supply of resources so that you can do more stuff with the cards you have acquired on your turn. And that is the balancing act, knowing when do you play your 4, when do you play your 1, how do I respond to someone else outbidding me here, and knowing I'm going to get those resources now. I might not need to actually own this card because I'm going to get this influx of resources. Find a way to manage all your resources and all your card abilities to generate as many possible points as you can. That engine that you're building, it starts super quickly, super slow, and super quickly and super slow. It starts off by being a really slow engine and with turns flowing very quickly, but by that last turn, there's so many things you can do, and you're just seeing your points multiply. It's an exciting game. I'm super surprised by it. Honestly, this is one of the ones on the list that I think will rise over time as I play it more. Kind of the opposite to Oath, that I think will fall over time. Furnace, I could see easily making it into the top 5 of my 2021 games after I've played it in more sessions with more people and more higher player counts. But right now, I am super impressed by this game. I understand why it's appearing on lots of people's lists. That is Furnace. I highly recommend you check it out. All right, next up, my number 8 game of 2021 is a little game called Canopy. I've talked a lot about Canopy on the channel in a few different videos now, and that's just because I was honestly completely blown away and surprised by how much I enjoyed Canopy this year. I was I wasn't even a backer. I was a late pledger to Canopy because I missed the campaign completely. And I honestly liked the art style. From what I read about the game, it seemed like I was gonna enjoy it, but I don't think I was expecting to like it as much as I did. I thought it would be a game I played, did some content on the channel about, shared it with a few different people, different sessions, and then eventually it would just sort of, get replaced by other games in my collection, or I, would pass it on to someone else. And I was blown away by how much I enjoyed my sessions of Canopy. It's such a simple playing game. The Winston style of draft that it uses, which is basically there's 3 piles of cards. You look at the first pile and see what the selection is, and if you choose not to take it, you have to put it face down again and add a face down card to it that you don't know what you've added to that pile, and look at the next one. You keep doing that until you take a pile or you take a blind card off the top of the deck. So you're constantly adding cards you don't know what they are to these piles, and everyone's doing the same draft system back and forth. I mean, turns fly by. You're basically just choosing a pile on your turn, that's it. You're adding it to your sort of personal rainforest that's going on. So you have like different animals that are being added on. You have plants, you have disease cards, you have fire cards, you have seed cards, you have rain and sun cards that are getting added on. They all score differently. Some of them are detrimental to you. It's in the same way that I love a game like Sushi Go. Canopy is that same style of addictiveness where it is really simple mechanics that in the 2-player environment, which I think is the best way to experience Canopy, there's so much variety because of not knowing which cards are going to come up in which seasons. There's advanced cards you can include on all the decks. You don't know what you're what you're leaving for your opponent by adding cards to a pile that you don't know what you've added. And sometimes you look at a pile and you say, oh man, I really need these 3 flowers that are in here. That would really, really help me. But it comes with 2 disease cards and a fire card, and if you take them, you're gonna set yourself back on everything else you're doing. The canopies and the trees themselves that you're trying to collect. Whoever has the tallest tree is getting bonus points, but at the same time, whoever has the most trees at the end of the game is going to get bonus points. Whenever you take a canopy, you have to cap a tree. You can't choose not to. There's so many little elements of canopy that you're sort of pushing your luck as you go. I think Carlo said that in one of the videos, and that really says it best, is it has an injection of push your luck in it, where you're saying, how long do I wait before I cap off these trees? Do I want to try to win tallest tree in this season, or do I want to wait until the next season to try to do that? And at the same time, you're doing this like tableau building with set collection, saying, can I get the most of this? Can I get the most of this? Can I get this many of this card? There's so many cool things going on in Canopy. I'm really surprised by it. For such a small game, it really does offer a lot. I hope a lot of people experience this game and discover it over the next year, because I think it's one that is just going to fly under people's radars a little bit by the fact that it's not a super flashy game by any means, but the artwork is stunning, the theme is integrated well, and the gameplay is solid. So that is Canopy. That is my number 8 game of 2021. All right, next up on the list, another game I've talked a few times about in a few different videos, that is Overboss, a boss monster adventure. So Overboss is very different than the game that preceded it, which was Boss Monster. In this game, you have a board with these different tiles that you're sort of adding onto I think it's 4x3, 12 spots, if I'm not mistaken. I think you get 12 turns, and you're adding a tile each turn to the board. You're drafting them from the center. Each of these tiles has a different terrain type, so one might be associated with clouds, one might be associated with swamps or forests, whatever the case may be. You're collecting those. Each of them has their own way of scoring and different traits, and you're also adding little monster minion type tokens onto these tiles as you're drafting. You're also drafting these little tiny tokens as well, and you want to try to match territories with the tiles. So, a monster that wants to go to a forest, you're trying to put onto the forest tiles, but at the same time, you're trying to line up like minions across different terrain in your board. There's a bunch of different things you're doing. You can't do it all, and usually those are the games I enjoy so much, is where you can never get a perfect game, so you do as best you can, and then it just makes you want to come back and see, can you do better next time? Can you beat your score? How streamlined and optimized can you make your boards? So it has that addictiveness to it. There's also a bunch of different variants that it includes that honestly, now I never play without the variants, but for instance, the bosses that you're familiar with potentially from Boss Monster had to have their own set of cards that add different abilities and one-time use abilities that you can do throughout the game. That changes things up, sort of like an asynchronous type of ability. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. I haven't even talked about the fact that the theme is this sort of 8-bit style of video game graphics, which obviously I grew up with NES and Super Nintendo, so that speaks to me right away. It's the reason I liked Boss Monster so much. That brings me back to this. It has a solid 1-player mode. If you follow Foster the Meeple's channel, you already know by now how adored the solo mode is over there. I love it as well, and it is well earned. It's a great solo mode as well. Overall, it's just such a fantastic experience. And again, as is a trend with, like I just talked about, Furnace and Canopy, this plays very, very quickly, to the point where, you're compelled to say, let's just play another game. Or, if you only have half an hour and you're like, do we have time for another game? You have time for Overboss. So it's a game I think you'll get to the table a lot as well. And it's not imposing by any means. The rules are really simple to explain. The strategy you might not grasp right away, especially someone who's maybe newer to board games. The first time they learn this game, they might not understand everything they're trying to do to maximize their points, but they're going to understand the rules. And because it plays so quick, it's not going to feel like, oh, you need to explain a whole bunch to them earlier, because now they're feeling lost an hour into the game. If you're able to play in 30 to 40 minutes, even if they felt a little lost, just play another session, and then they've learned the strategy. By that point, they're going to enjoy the experience a little bit more. So add on to that all the variety you get by the fact that you don't use all the tiles in one game, and you won't see all the tiles in one game. So So there's tons of variety. It'll keep you coming back to the table. Overboss was on my top 50 of all time list, and it is I think it's completely deserved. I'm interested to see over time where this ranks for me. It's not the only game to do these type of mechanics, so it's definitely one that I think is going to have tons of competition over the next X number of years to stay on some of these lists. But right now, I'm really, really impressed with Overboss, and that is my number 7 game of 2021. All right, coming in at number 6 of 2021 for me is Winter Kingdom. I don't actually own this game. Carlo does, and I don't have his copy here. Winter Kingdom is a spiritual successor of sorts to Kingdom Builder. So Kingdom Builder is a game that's one of my favorite of all times. It has really simple gameplay, but the strategy is really, really deep with Kingdom Builder, to the point that if you are someone who's played a bunch of Kingdom Builder and you play with someone brand new, oftentimes that's the sort of the downside to Kingdom Builder, is that they feel they're a little bit lost and they're going to fall behind really quickly, because the strategy is something that can make a huge swing in how many points you're scoring. Winter Kingdom takes all the things that you're familiar with Kingdom Builder, all those mechanics, the way you place your different settlements on the board is the exact same way. Honestly, if you come in with the knowledge of Kingdom Builder, you're going to be halfway there and learning the rules. But Winter Kingdom injects a whole bunch more variety. So whereas Kingdom Builder, over time, you might think, I need to pick up expansions to keep some of the variety fresh, and to keep it being a game that I want to hit the table because games are feeling very similar. Winter Kingdom feels like it almost includes the variety of expansions in the box. So whether it be different types of different player powers or just completely new mechanics in general, Winter Kingdom takes Kingdom Builder and it just propels it to the next level, is sort of the best way to say it. And it's not just the fact that it's a winterized theme. Everything about it, they've just sort of evolved on, to the point that I had such a good time with Winter Kingdom that I'm wondering if over time I will end up getting rid of Kingdom Builder in my collection and replacing it with Winter Kingdom, because if I want Winter Kingdom, I want to own it, just like I don't want to just play it off of Carlo's shelf whenever I can. But I don't think I want to own both copies, Kingdom Builder and Winter Kingdom, because I have this sneaking suspicion that every time I'm going to feel the urge to play one, I'm just going to play Winter Kingdom instead at that point. So that's a pretty good sign. The fact that Kingdom Builder is one of my favorite games of all time and Winter Kingdom might replace it goes to show how much I enjoy that game. And the fact that it still only made number 6 on this list shows just how competitive this year actually was. But I think this is one that'll climb over time the more I play this game, because that's what happens with Kingdom Builder. I played a couple times, thought, hey, I like this game, but it wasn't until I played a dozen times that I realized just how much I loved Kingdom Builder, and it became a mainstay. Almost one of those games where you're like, oh, we can't decide what to play, let's play this. That was Kingdom Builder for me. So really impressed by Winter Kingdom. It was on Kickstarter. I did not back it. I kind of forgot about it. I almost didn't think it was going to be a game that I was going to play anytime soon. I thought, you know what? I played Kingdom Builder. Maybe they're just trying to cash in on the success and the popularity of it. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I absolutely adore it. If you haven't tried it out and you're a fan of Kingdom Builder, I would really, really encourage you to, because I think that you'll be surprised by how much it scratches that itch and evolves on it. If you've played a ton of expansions for Kingdom Builder, maybe it's not going to feel as fresh for you. I've never played any of the expansions for Kingdom Builder, so to me, this was such a step up that I have been thinking about it ever since I stopped playing it, and that's a really good sign with me for games. If I keep thinking about them after a session and I keep thinking, I want to play that again, it's a really good sign that something has landed for me, and that's how I felt with Winter Kingdom, sorry. So Winter Kingdom is my number 6 game of 2021. All right, my number 5 game of 2021, the first game in the top 5, is Land vs. Sea. This is another game that I don't own. Carlo does, but I've been actively trying to get my own copy of this, looking at online retailers and stuff, because I've had such a great time with it. This is a simple tile placement game, but again, like a couple of the other games we've talked about, really deep strategy. One player plays going for the land tiles, one player is going for the sea tiles. If you play a 3-player game, one player is the cartographer, essentially trying to build the most beautiful area. I haven't played the 3-player game yet, but it's just really cool they include this other mode. But basically, you guys are going to have these double-sided tiles, and you're going to be placing them into this area that's slowly building out with tiles. The person who's going for land is trying to close off large land masses and score as many points as possible based on what's enclosed within them. And the sea person is doing the same thing, but with the sea area as well. It comes with a couple of different modules inside. One of them is called, I was going to forget, so I had to bring some on my phone, Mountains and Coral, and the other one is Caravan and Ships. You can play without them, and it's a way more simple game, but we played with them. I found it to be way more interesting. Some of the things you have to consider with them make it so that every turn you feel like there's tons of different ways you can score or where you can place your tile, and each one, you know, makes it so that you can't, by the end of the game, do everything you want with all the tiles you're going to get access to. So you have to say, okay, am I going to really try to close off this gigantic terrain that I know my opponent's going to stop me from trying to do, or am I just going to hit these smaller ones where I feel safer and I can get, like, you know, a smaller amount of points but spread across a greater landmass. So there's a lot of cool decision making you're making there. There's actual abilities on these tiles as well. So some of them might allow you to steal tiles from your opponent. Other ones might allow you to play another turn, essentially. Because the tiles are double-sided, you have hidden information about one side and the other side is open information to the player. That adds in a whole other thing where I can say, okay, I know that they have this ability, but what I didn't know is that underneath they have the ability to steal one of my tiles. So there's a ton of really cool stuff going on, and it's, again, a simple plain tile placement game, tile laying game that I was blown away by how much strategy there really is, and how many, like, for how simple it was, you look at it and expect, oh, this game is going to take us half an hour to play. And honestly, you can probably have games that are really quick of land versus sea, but the amount of times that we would sit there looking at the board going, okay, well, I could place here, and then that would close off this. But if I take this one and place it here, then that'll extend this. But if I do this, it'll block my opponent from doing this. Like, you can't possibly do everything. And so you end up just feeling super excited by all the possibilities. At least that's how I felt playing it. I never felt overwhelmed. I felt excited. And I just had such a blast playing it. So I love games like this that are small, easy to teach, but have this really deep strategy because I can play them with a variety of people. Land versus Sea is going to be one of those games. I'm absolutely going to buy my own copy of it. And I am not surprised at all that it landed so high on this list. It is number 5 of 2021. Number 4, the last game on the list that I don't own. This is also Carlo's copy. I just returned it to him, actually. One of my biggest surprises of the year, because I did not think this would ever make my top 10 or that I would even enjoy it nearly as much as I did, and that is Hadrian's Wall. So Hadrian's Wall is a very complex, I shouldn't say very complex, but a more complex roll and write than you're probably used to if you've played a lot of roll and write games. That's pretty clever. This is not. This is very much, there's a lot more going on here. The rule book is going to look super imposing the first time you open it up. The 2 sheets that you're writing on for this roll and write are going to look super imposing. What you'll find is after you know the rules, and especially after you know the iconography, everything is going to make way more sense and it's going to flow a lot quicker. The best part of roll and writes for me is usually the comboing. So in a game like that's pretty clever, you know, doing one thing or putting an X in this box that says now you get to write an X in a purple box, which allows you to do this in this box. That comboing and seeing how much you can extend yourself is one of the most exciting, fun parts of roll and writes. And Hadrian's Wall is just ripe with this. There's so much comboing going on, but it's so thematically tied to your defense of this wall, and that there's always several things you can do that you spend a lot of time sitting there going, okay, if I do this, that's going to give me protection here, but in order to scratch this box off, I have to have this box scratched off, and to do that, I got to do this. But here, if I scratch this box, maybe I can increase my income next round. So tons of really cool stuff. It's one of those games that every time you finish a session, at least for me, I wanted to play it again right away, and usually did, because I wanted to, 1, see if I could get a better score. 2, I realized, oh, because I extended myself in this area, I know next time I wouldn't do that because I made it so that I couldn't focus on this area. So I want to play again to try this new strategy. It is a fantastic solo experience. That's the only way I've played it. I think that's the only way Carlos played it. And based on having played this a few times now, it would be a lot of downtime. It would be a lot of everyone just sort of sitting doing their own thing if you're playing with multiple players, which if you're all sort of wanting to share in an experience together like this, it might be completely fine. But for me, it worked so well as just a game where I, brewed a pot of coffee, sat down on my coffee table, and just played a couple sessions of Hadrian's Wall. This is another one I'm going to buy as soon as I can find a copy available, because I think I will be going through that stack of sheets that comes in it pretty quick with how much I enjoy this game. Don't let this slip under your radar. It slipped under mine. I heard about it. I saw it talked about in different places, but I just never really gave it the time of day for some reason. And I'm guilty of that with a lot of games, thinking like, for one reason or another, this box art makes me think I'm not going to like it, or this concept makes me think I'm not going to like it. I'm so glad Carlo gave this one a shot and talked it up so much to me about how much he loved it, because it compelled me to play it, and now it's one of my favorite games of the year. So this is my number 4 game of 2021. Okay, on to games I still do own. So my number 3 game of 2021, and honestly, now that we're in this top 3, I considered having every single one of these games in spot number 1. In fact, at one point or another, I did have every one of these games in spot number 1. So it's razor thin how close these all are. But ultimately, my number 3 I landed on is Witchstone. So Witchstone is a game that's partially designed by Reiner Knizia, which if you watch the channel, you know is one of our favorite designers, and a name that I'm going to once again fail to pronounce, which is Martino. You know what? I'm not going to try. I'm going to put it up on screen. I've already butchered this once. I feel bad every time I butcher people's names. It's become a mainstay of this channel. We need to make some sort of game with how bad can Dylan butcher people's names, designers' names that he's trying to say on videos. But yeah, partially designed by René Knizia and one other gentleman as well whose name's on the screen. Witchstone is a... How do I describe Witchstone? There's so much cool stuff going on. Basically, you have a cauldron, a little small cauldron that you're going to be adding these domino style of tiles. And I say domino because even though they're not shaped like dominoes, they have an icon on either side of it. When you place one of these domino style tiles into your cauldron, the icons are going to stand for something that's an action that you get to activate now on the main board that's part of Witchstone. The twist is, whenever you match icons next to each other that they're touching, say you put a tile down that now creates a grouping of 4 of the same icon, you now get to take that action 4 times rather than just 1. This can quickly snowball. So I think they list in the rulebook that the max number of actions you can possibly get in a single game of Witchstone is like 60 or it might even been higher, whatever it is. So that amount could also be as low as like 30. So, or maybe even less. So you're basically going to have this huge fluctuation of how many actions you're taking in each game of Witchstone, and each one is going to apply to a different area of the board. So like the main circular area of the board involves placing these little energy crystals to create these pathways that are all linked together, and you're trying to connect different locations. You also have these different meeples that are on this area that you're slowly adding more to, and having them go across these energy connections you're doing. That's a separate action. You're getting these cards on the right side of the board that are sort of endgame scoring conditions. There's this wand path at the bottom of the board where every time you leapfrog your opponent and land in certain spaces, you're getting to execute the space and getting bonuses for having passed your opponent or being the furthest one in first place on this with this wand. There's I think it's like a shelving system is what they would, I can't remember what the official name of it, but it's like a shelving system with different potions that you're adding different cubes to or different crystals to be able to execute another set of actions. There's so many different parts of the board, and yet it's not nearly as complicated as it might look when you first lay it out. Like, it's one of those games where, again, after you learn the rules, you can get through a game of Witchstone pretty quickly, and it's so much fun to see how many actions you can possibly get and in what order you're going to do them to maximize your points. Managing your cauldron is so ridiculously fun because you have these crystals that start in your cauldron and you can't place your tiles on them. And one of your actions is being able to move crystals, and you're trying to move them off your board to get bonus actions, but also clear spots for these dominoes to go down. So there's tons of different maneuvering you're doing to in the best way you can execute your cauldron and your dominoes to be able to take these actions. And at the same time, there's just multiple ways of scoring, and that's one of my favorite things in board games. It's the reason a game like Feast for Odin resonates so much with me, is because there's so many different ways to score and so many paths you can take. Witchstone doesn't have that many, but it does have enough that you can constantly have a different strategy than your opponent going on and still be in contention, and then look at the end of the game at the scoring pad, whatever, and say, oh, that's interesting that you took this path and I took this path. But you also can't just leave your opponent to their own devices to sort of just, oh, they're doing these actions, I'll do these, because you're just going to let them run away with that category. So you have to step in and block them and take some of those actions. So really, really fun game. I would really highly recommend that you check out Witchstone. I feel like I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it, and maybe that's just because I've been missing the conversations. I don't know. It was a game that I featured on one of my games I'm most excited for last year, and then I didn't really hear anyone else talk about it. I kind of forgot it was coming out, but now that I have it in my hands, again, it almost was number 1 on my list. I enjoy it so much. As I play it more, it might become my favorite game of the year, but as of right now, it is spot number 3, 2021. All right, my number 2 game of 2021 is a game that I honestly haven't heard a lot of people talk about on their lists of best games from 2021. And I'm not sure if it's because a lot of people consider this a 2020 game. It is listed as 2020 on Board Game Geek, but this definitely didn't come out until 2021 here in North America, and I think it was like the first 2 weeks of 2021. But it's such a phenomenal game. I'm curious if people, it just didn't resonate with as many people as it did with me, or if it was considered a 2020 game, people didn't consider it in contention for this list. Either way, my number 2 game is Hallertau. So Hallertau is Uwe Rosenberg's apparently his last big box game, but we'll see if that happens. I refuse to believe it. This is a big box game in the same vein as Agricola and Caverna and Feast for Odin and Le Havre and all that kind of stuff. But it's got some unique stuff going on that even after all these big box games that Uwe has released, it finds a way to do stuff differently and new. So the card system in Hallertau is one of the things that makes it the most unique. I know it's, I think, Carlo's favorite thing about this game. You can play the cards at any time, and there's tons of variety in them, so you're constantly playing more cards to get more resources, to generate different abilities, things like that. That keeps every game fresh and different because there's different decks you'll use in different games, so sometimes you'll have a completely new set of cards that you didn't even experience the last game you played. And of course, which cards you get compared to your opponents will change how the game flows. At the same time, there's a community center board in the middle of the table for each player that you're having to slide in order to gain the majority of your points. And when I say slide, it's because there's 5 small buildings that are blocking it from moving. In order to move those buildings, you have to generate resources from your fields. As you generate resources and spend them, you'll move the small buildings, which moves the large building, which gets you more workers, and will also eventually get you points. Those workers can be used on the worker placement board, which has its own unique thing going on, where every time you place a worker on one of the spots to use it, the next person to go there, even if you want to go there again yourself, has to pay 1 more than was used last time, up to a max of 3. So an action could cost 1 the first time it's used, but now is going to cost 3 later on, which is a huge increase considering the most workers you'll ever get in this game is 12. And that's only if you push your community center board enough to get there. So sometimes if you have 9 workers and you wanted to use 3 on a single spot, that's 1/3 of your workers. That's if you did that for every single action that turn, you'd only get 3 actions. So it makes things really, really important in the decision process and when you choose to go to certain ones to block them from your opponent, or cause, if not block them, force them to spend more workers. You have all these cards being played. You have this community center board being moved. There's just so much cool stuff going on in Hallertau that every game has felt so unique, so different. I'm excited to try this with 4 players. I haven't done that yet. I don't think it'll by any means be my favorite player count. I just know that I've only played Feast for Odin with 4 once, and I'm really glad I did because it's one of those experiences that even though you don't want to do it all the time, you do want to do it that one time for that epic, big Uwe box experience. I definitely want to have that with Hallertau, but I implore you, if you're a fan of Uwe Rosenberg's big box games, to check out Hallertau, give it a chance. There is a lot of cool stuff going on. It's not nowhere near as complicated as, or complex, I should say, as a game like Feast for Odin or Le Havre Agricola. I think it's a more streamlined version of, not version of those games, but it's a more streamlined approach to a big box game from Uwe, but it's still got that, big box Uwe feeling and charm, and I just absolutely adore it. It was high up on my top 50 of all time. I think it'll stay on that list for a while, even if it doesn't stay in that spot. And again, I'm curious why more people haven't talked about it, and maybe it's just one of those games that didn't land for other people like it did for me, or maybe a lot of people just forgot that it came out this year. But it did come out a couple weeks into January of 2021, and that is why it's my number 2 game of 2021. Again, almost number 1, along with Witchstone and the game we're about to talk about, but it still earns its spot at number 2. Okay, number 1 game of 2021. What was my favorite game last year? Well, honestly, it could have been any of the ones I already talked about. This is going to be something that I think changes every month for me, because maybe not every month, but as I play certain ones more, all these games on this list were like so phenomenal. Some of them are such surprises to me. I've enjoyed so many of the games I played in 2021, but this one is one that I just cannot stop thinking about ever since I played it. It plays so quick, but gives me so much enjoyment every time I play it, and there's so much different to it that all I want to do is just introduce it to everybody in my life who plays board games, because I think it's just, 1, I just want to play it more, so it's an excuse to play this game more, but 2, I just think it's one that I want to see how many people I can hook into, because it's an affordable game that I think more people will buy that way, and it just got so much charm and longevity because of the variability of it. So I've talked enough about it without bringing it onto screen. My number 1 game of 2021 is, if I can reach it, Radlands. So Radlands has been talked about a lot in the last little bit. I will be the first to admit there's probably a little bit of bias here for me in terms of the fact that I love card dueling games. I grew up with Magic the Gathering, as did Carlo. We played so much Magic over the years. I play Hearthstone still. We've played Keyforge. There's so many card games we've played that automatically I just gravitate towards new, interesting card battling, especially 2-player card battling games that are released, because I'm curious to see what else other people are going to find to inject that genre with new stuff and stuff that makes people want to come back and find a new system that works amongst all the card battlers that are out there. Radlands combines a few different ideas I've seen in other games with this lane system, but it's the lanes that are defending your own camps, and the whole point of the game is to defeat your opponent's camps and protect your own camps, and putting your own cards and people in front of your camps is essentially protecting them. The cool thing is there is a large deck of camps, and every game you're only going to use 3 of them, so you're going to draw 6 and you're going to choose 3 to keep. The abilities that are on the camps are going to dictate a lot of your strategy and how that game plays for you. So you might take a camp that is a one-time use, it explodes and kills your entire opponent's board, but your camp is then destroyed. And again, if all your camps are destroyed, you lose the game. Are you going to take one of those camps to have this huge nuke-style effect at the sacrifice of one of your camps? Are you willing to do that with the other camps you're taking? There's another camp that actually moves on the board and moves up the lane, so as if it's not protected, but when it reaches the final spot, it ends up destroying one of your opponent's camps, but it makes itself more vulnerable. There's other camps that stay still, are very much, not doing anything crazy on the board, but have the really amazing abilities that are going to, dictate the strategy of what you're trying to do with the cards you're drawing. Every card in Radlands can be played for its actual card ability, or you can junk it to get a different effect than the top of the card. So if you don't want to play that card, spend the water, tokens to be able to play this card because you want to do other things in your turn, you can junk that card and say, oh, junking this card allows me to move my raiders over to the event pile, or it allows me to draw a new card, or it allows me to put draw a card, for instance, from the deck. There's all these different junk effects that basically make it so that every card has 2 different things you can do with it, which I've always enjoyed from games when cards have a sort of a dual use. It really makes you strategize and think a little bit differently of how you're going to use these cards. It's one of the reasons I like games like Marvel Champions, where a card can be used as a resource to pay for stuff, or it can be used for its ability. Radlands has a bit of that going on as well. It does have this event thing that I alluded to, like with where you move your raiders into it. So the raiders is a card that you always have access to, that is an event that when you move it to the event stack, it goes into spot number 2 on the event stack, and that means it's going to take 2 turns for it to activate. You can think of it like a spell that takes time to cast. So whatever the number is listed in this bomb icon that's on the card, that's how many turns it's going to take for this to take effect. But there's ways to manipulate that stack. So maybe you have a card that says move all your events up by 1 spot, or delay your opponent's events by 1 spot. So you can manipulate those at the same time. I didn't even mention the fact that you don't have your own deck of cards. It's a shared deck between both players. So if I draw a card, I'm adding that to my hand and taking it away from being accessed by the opponent, because they can no longer draw that card unless there's another copy in the deck. So there's so many cool things going on with Radlands. I feel like I can't say it all. It's just one of those games that for such a little investment, you get so much game there and yes, only 2 players, and for some people, you're looking for 3 and 4 player games or larger groups, but as a 2-player card battling game, the component quality, the gameplay, the fun factor, and the uniqueness and the variability of this, there's so much to offer that it's probably the game that I most want to go back to on almost a daily basis. Every time I've gone to someone's house with games in the last 2 weeks, I brought Radlands along. Even if we were going knowing we were going to play something else, I thought, well, if we have 20 minutes, maybe I can convince us to play a game of Radlands. And sometimes we have, sometimes we haven't, but because of the length of play, you can do that, and it's such a fun experience that you're going to want to do that. So again, it's not going to be for everyone. If you're not a card battling fan, I don't think this is necessarily the game that's going to convince you, but I think it has a better chance of convincing you than other card battlers that require a ton of investment of money and time. This is a 20 to 30 minute game that costs $20 to $30 for the retail pledge, or the retail cost of the game, that even if you find out it's not for you, you don't have to go invest it to buy, booster packs upon booster packs upon booster packs of cards, or even in the case of Marvel Champions, a $60 to $70 core set to find out whether a game is for you. This is a really affordable game to buy with the cost, and also I think it has just a really good chance of landing with people because of how addictive I find this gameplay to be. So I'm blown away by how much I liked Radlands, because when we backed it, it was sort of I don't want to say a last minute back, but me and Carlo debated for a while whether we were going to back it. We were interested, we didn't know how interested, we debated waiting for it to just come to retail. I'm so glad we backed it, because look at this, it turned out to be my favorite game of 2021. So again, it could change over time. So many of these games are great. I just want to stress that these could move around, but as of right now, this is the game I can't stop thinking about from last year, and this is the game I just keep wanting to come back to as often as possible. And those are my top 10 games of 2021, from Radlands all the way to Oath. Like I said at the beginning, the margins are razor thin here between some of these games. I mean, the difference between how much I liked Radlands to how much I liked a game like Hadrian's Wall is not that much different. It was really hard for me to make this list, but this is where I landed on when I was filming this. Let me know in the comments which ones you were surprised about their placement, surprised that I kept on the list, or that it ended up on the list. Put your top 10 games of 2021 in the comments. I'd love to comment on them and discuss with you why you picked picked certain games or why you're surprised I didn't pick certain games. If there's any games you're wondering why they were on the list, some of them I may not have played. I played a lot from 2021 that I thought would have a chance of making the list. One of the ones I didn't is Sleeping Gods. I think when I played that game, that's one that'll end up being one of my favorites from 2021. I don't know for sure, but I do love campaign games, and I've heard a lot of great stuff about that. The one that just missed the list, number 11, was Imperial Steam. I was super blown away by how much I liked that game. I don't play a lot of train games. I think the only one I have played is Ticket to Ride. Carlo has been, playing a bunch of Imperial Steam and also preparing to do some content for the channel on it, and that is one that I really enjoyed. I just haven't played it enough. After I have, it could make a list like this. So let me know in the comments all those things. Let's discuss these picks. Let's see what your picks are. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and being with us through all of 2021. I am so excited by all the content that came out that year and all the games we got to play and how great the games were, but I'm also really excited about 2022 and how many cool games we're going to play, especially ones based on some of the announcements we've had and some of the games that are coming out. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.